How's it going, everybody? It's Derek here, and today I'm going to be making a video that's a little bit different from my videos in the past. I promised you guys if you subscribed I was going to get out some really good content, so this is a video I've been working on for the past few weeks and I hope you guys enjoy it. First of all, I want to give a big shout out to B-Ball Breakdown. He happens to break down NBA basketball, and I wanted to do the same thing for climbing. One of the main things that makes B-Ball Breakdown so appealing to me is that it goes into a depth that most people really wouldn't look into. Like if you watch SportsCenter, it kind of just goes over the surface level when there in fact is much more depth. I wanted to apply that same logic to climbing because I don't think that we really look into enough of the technical aspects of climbing sometimes. So this video is going to be going over the concept of finding the best BMI to be at to be a top performing climber. Now, while the idea is a little bit abstract, I went ahead and collected the data on the top 10 finishers for lead and bouldering for 2015 from ifsc.com. Some of the data was not entered for the height and weight, so I couldn't find the BMI of these athletes, as well as there were two athletes that finished in top 10 for both categories. I did not double their data, and if you want to look at the data that I used, I'll leave it in the description below. Now, with a small sample size of only 16 athletes, the data is by no means 100%, but it's going to be as accurate as possible with the limited data that I was able to collect. So what I'm trying to figure out is where the BMIs will be for all male World Cup climbers. I wasn't able to calculate the BMIs for the female side because for whatever reason ifsc.com does not have a lot of information on the height and weight of the female side. Now, with any statistics and trying to create a bell curve, there's going to be a margin of error. Also, the IFSC has minimums for BMIs, which is 17 for the male side and 18 for the female side. And the reason for this difference is that females tend to have higher BMIs. For a female to be healthy, they would actually on average have a higher BMI because their bodies naturally carry more fat. Okay, so the first thing I want to explain is the bell curve or the standard deviation and how to read the data on that. So I went ahead and just graphed a standard deviation of the male heights in America. So there's many ways to look at this data, but you can see the middle line is going to be the mean or the average. So the average male adult in America is 5'9". You could also look at a group between 5'6" and 5'9". About 34% of adults will be in that height range. Or you could also group together sections such as 5'6" to 6 foot and say that about 68% of male adults in America will fall between that height range. So now I'm going to isolate a smaller group within that large population of America, and that's going to be NBA players. And you can see that the NBA players' heights are moved to the right, and that's because the average NBA player is taller, and you can see the comparison here. So if someone were to ask the question, what's the best height to be in the NBA? You wouldn't necessarily say that 6'7" is the best height, but you could say that between the heights of 6 foot and 7'1", it's a pretty good place to start if you want to be in the NBA. Now, that's not to say that there's extremes on both ends. There's always going to be outliers, such as Manute Bol or Muggsy Bogues, for a few reasons. In this case, most humans are not above the height of 7'1", so you're not going to see many NBA athletes at that height at all. Or for the other reason, Muggsy Bogues happened to be an extremely good player, just happened to be really short, but good enough to make it in the NBA. So what I went ahead and did was create a BMI scale for the general population of America. And if you look at the middle line, the average BMI is 29. So if you were to group the four middle sections, you would see that about 95% of people in America fall between the BMIs of 19.5 and 38.5. Now I'm going to go ahead and overlay the BMIs of the men's World Cup climbers. And you can see that they're overall moved to the left. So World Cup climbers tend to have a lower BMI than the average person. So you could see that the overall BMIs for these World Cup climbers is to the left. So that means that the average BMI is going to be much lower than the male general population. Also, their bell curve is quite compressed, meaning that their BMI range is extremely small compared to the male general population again. So I'm going to break down this data a little bit further, and for the reason that there's a BMI minimum, you're actually not going to see any athletes on the far left end of this bell curve, so that's not 100% accurate. But the main thing you could get from the data is that an estimated 95% of World Cup climbing athletes will have a BMI between 17.7 and 22.5. So one of the most interesting things I found when looking at this is that the 2015 men's overall boulders happen to have a very wide range. Now if you look at the winner Chon Jongwon, who's considered to be a skinnier climber, and then Hojer, who's considered to be a heavier climber, they actually finished first and second place. So looking further into the data, I was able to see that there was really no relationship in having a lower BMI performing better or having a higher BMI on the bell curve being a better performer. So I went ahead and graphed the top 3 finishers for the female side in 2015. I had to plot them on the men's bell curve, which is actually not going to be accurate for the females, but it shows you a good representation of where they would fall at as well. Keep in mind that females tend to have a higher BMI on average. And just for curiosity's sake, I went ahead and graphed Chris Sharma and Alex Puccio, who are 2 climbers that most people consider to be heavier climbers. As you can see, they still fall in the bell curve, which, as we saw earlier, is really low compared to the general population. So if you look at the data that I collected data from the lead climber side and the boulder side. And there really is no clear conclusions on if lead climbers or boulders tend to have higher or lower BMIs. The average BMI for a lead climber was 20, and the average BMI for a boulder was 20.3, which is extremely close. Also on the same line is that a lower BMI or higher BMI didn't perform any better. The same holds true for height. Shorter climbers or taller climbers didn't have a trend in whether they performed better or not. One of the main things that I see is that there's an ideal BMI range, and it happens to be very small, and it really reminds me a lot of another sport, which would be UFC. On the left here is Conor McGregor at his ideal fighting weight, and he happens to have a BMI of 21.4. On the right is a picture of him right before the Nate Diaz fight with a BMI of 25.1. Now if you remember that fight, he seemed to gas himself out really early. Even though he had more strength, it just wasn't the most effective or efficient BMI for him to be at.
I took the chance going at 170, but Nate came in. He was, I felt I took him the first round, but I was inefficient with my energy. But I'm humble in victory or defeat. I respect Nate. He came in. He took the fight on short notice, came in at 170 and done the job. He was efficient. I wasn't efficient. That was it, I feel.
And I think the same holds true for climbing. Now if you look at the way the BMIs are so far to the left of the average population, my general conclusion is that you want to have a BMI that's fairly low but still maintain most of your strength, and to do that you would still have an extremely low BMI. I think UFC fighters and climbers are very similar in the fact that you don't want any extra weight on you, but at the same time you want to be as strong as possible. So if you look at Ronda Rousey and Miesha Tate, they both have fairly low BMIs if you're going to be comparing to general population. Ronda Rousey at 21.1 at her fighting weight and Miesha Tate at 21.8. And it sparked my curiosity to see how well they climb, so here's a clip. Okay, so to make a solid conclusion looking at the data, I'm going to go ahead and say for the male side, you want to be at a BMI of 23 or lower with a minimum of 17. And for the female side, be at a BMI of 25 or lower with a minimum of 18. And of course, I'm not saying that everyone needs to be at these BMIs. I know Jan Hojer in particular only drops to that low of a BMI when he's training for the World Cup. So you could be an extremely strong climber and a higher BMI. I know that. This is just looking at the data collected from these World Cup athletes. And also, if you want to find your BMI, I'm going to go ahead and link to the BMI calculator that I used for all of the data that I collected, as well as a reverse calculator, which would allow you to type in your height and a target BMI. So which in my case, I'm 5'5", and say I want to have the same BMI as Jan Hojer. So I plug in 22.5 for the BMI, and it's going to show me that the weight I would need to be at is about 135 pounds. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys have any questions or comments, make sure to just comment below and I'll try to answer them. And if you enjoyed it, make sure to hit the like button. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe for more videos. And I'll see you guys next time.